All right, hey everybody, welcome to the stream. Today we're going to be taking a look at some more news from the Shadowlands Alpha. We're also going to be deep diving a little bit into Torghast Tower of the Damned, Covenants, and the Soulbind System. So these are things that we've gotten more information about. Okay, let's give this a try again, see if YouTube doesn't, throw a bunch of errors and stuff at me. All right, I'm going to redo my intro. We'll cut the other one off at the beginning. So, hey everybody, welcome to the stream. We are taking a look at some new Shadowlands news, as well as taking a deeper dive into Torghast Tower of the Damned, Covenant abilities and Covenants in general, as well as a look at the Soulbind system. That's what's coming up in this video. It's a talking head video, so once again, I'm just going to be discussing my thoughts about what I've seen in the alpha. Still don't have access to it yet, so most of what I'm going to be looking at is stuff on Wowhead. I may also swing by and talk about classes again and just give some updated thoughts on those. Like I said, I haven't been able to play them, but I have been able to watch Preach's videos and a few other videos and kind of confirm some of the thoughts that I had about the various classes through what they have talked about. And I just kind of want to update those thoughts as well. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump in. YouTube's still throwing errors at me, but I'm going to soldier on because hopefully it will fix itself, or you'll be able to watch this a little bit later on. All right, so first off, we are going to go through kind of what I would, describe like mini news, like little tidbits of news that are interesting, but we're probably not really going to dive deep into them. So first off, we have a new post from worldofwarcraft.com from the official website. This is a Shadowlands preview for Rivendreth and the Venthyr Covenant. So this is one of the 4 covenants that you can become a part of, and they're just kind of talking about the overall theme, the backstory behind the zone and the covenant itself. And so we're just gonna blow through here real quick and look. This is the kind of like vampire Castlevania, Vampire Hunter D sort of creepy looking faction. I think they look pretty cool. Actually, I like them quite a bit. Their zone does seem to be very blue and purple and maroon and gray, and then they kind of change it up in a couple of these screenshots, and they show some areas where it's really brown. So it's not the most vibrant of color palettes or the most varied of color palettes either. But I still think the zone looks pretty cool. So we've got some pictures of some of the various structures and artwork, and they kind of outline some of the stuff here. The giant castle in the zone is Castle Nathria, which is a fortress for the ruler of the zone. And they kind of get down here and talk about some of the denizens of Rivendreth. So we have the Venthyr, which are the vampiric sort of race. We have the Stone Legion, which is like all the gargoyles and everything. And then we have the Dredgers, which kind of look like a different take on goblins. They're basically like the servants of the Venthyr. You can see this one here kind of holding up the tray with the goblin on it and everything. And then down below, we get introduced to a couple of the key characters from the zone. So we have Sire Denathrius. He's the master of Rivendreth. And then we have Prince Renethal, who I believe is, he's the first Venthyr, the first vampire that was crafted by the master's own hand. So he's not the actual son of Denathrius, but he kind of is in terms of, being the first vampire Venthyr that was created by him. And then we also have General Draven, who is used to be the leader of the Stoneborn, but he has turned his back on his kin to side with Prince Renethal against Sire Denathrius. So all in all, I think the zone seems pretty cool. The background seems interesting. I actually like it quite a bit. I think the gargoyles look super doped. They look super cool, especially this dude. I don't know, like the Stoneborn. Maybe not so much that one, but you know, I like these gargoyles. They look cool. I doubt we're gonna get like a gargoyle allied race, but that's something I'd be interested in if they did decide to do it. So then they talk about the signature covenant ability for the Venthyr. We have Door of Shadows. We talked about this before. It says wind through the shadows appearing at the targeted location. It sounds really boring. Like this ability on its own with no modifications, no upgrades or anything sounds super boring. But we'll have to see. We haven't seen anyone use this one yet because this zone has not been available in the alpha so far. All the alpha testing has been done in basically Bastion or Torghast Towered the Damned. So we haven't been able to see people use this actual ability yet. But it does sound really boring. It sounds like a little boring teleport. So I'm hoping that it's actually interesting, it's good, or you can modify it to be really cool, because I do like the Covenant overall, but I honestly do think this one has the most uninteresting ability out of all of them. And then we get a look at some of the armor for the particular faction. I like that they're not showing the male set, because Blizzard notoriously has bad designs for the male sets. I don't know. Like, this one I kind of think looks interesting. Mostly if it kind of keeps that glow going on, like regardless of where you're at, that's pretty cool. I actually don't hate the plate one. I've never been a fan of these kind of helmets, but they actually made this one look less stupid than normal. And I think the gargoyles on the shoulders, that's kind of cool. The rogue set looks like a bunch of rogue sets that we've seen before. I don't think it looks bad. It just definitely, none of these really look all that like unique compared. Like we've seen sets like these before. I don't know. Like these transmogs, I think Bastion has some more interesting transmogs just because their armor kind of looks in some ways like stuff that we haven't seen before, or a like really interesting twist on something we've seen before. Whereas this just kind of looks like they put some skulls and gargoyles on things, and that was about it. So we have Halls of Atonement dungeon and story spoilers. So you know, cover your ears if you don't want to hear them. I'm not actually going to get really into the spoilers. I just wanted to take a look at the screenshots that are in here and just the kind of little tidbit up here, not getting into the story or the bosses. So it says the Halls of Atonement were once a pinnacle of redemption for the most prideful of souls. However, due to recent events, they've fallen into darkness and succumbed to forbidden magics. This is going to be a normal, heroic, or mythic difficulty dungeon available at level 50. This is one of 4 level up dungeons, so you're going to be able to play this one before you get to end game. It's definitely got the theme going on of the zone, and I really love these castles, the architecture and stuff. I really like the look of it. So we also have a post from Wowhead that is the Shadowlands Rivendreth zone preview. And this is where you can see a couple of different things. So we've got kind of the aesthetics of the NPCs. We've got the zone map, which we looked at before. And like I said, it looks like there are walls everywhere. And that might be a little bit annoying to navigate. But then we have more screenshots of the zone, a lot more than what Blizzard included. And this is where you can kind of see down here where you get some of the more like brown, gray looking areas. Definitely not a vibrant land. There is this cool like blood tentacle thing going on. I don't really know what's up with that. I think they talk about it a little bit, but that looks pretty sweet. Lots of cool architecture. We got a statue here. I believe that's of the master. Just cool stuff. This kind of makes me wish that they had housing. I think it'd be cool to get a Rivendreth themed housing. Okay, moving on into our tidbits of news. So Artisan writing skill has been removed in Shadowlands. So this is the 280% flight speed level that you had to get, which is great because that always seemed weird to have to like pay for the 280 and then pay for the 300% full flight training skill here. So it's nice that that is going away. And this is kind of what it's going to look like. So currently, apprentice writing, journeyman, expert, artisan, and master is now becoming apprentice, journeyman, expert, and master. So artisan is gone. The speeds stay the same for their respective ranks. The level requirements obviously change because the levels themselves have changed. So now you actually get writing at level 10 instead of level 20. So that's confirmation that you do get writing once you finish the introductory zone if you're on a new character. It also only costs 10 silver instead of 4 gold, which is amazing. And then all the way up, your writing ranks stay about the same in terms of gold. So it's just that first apprentice writing one that changes. And I think they're doing this to kind of introduce you to the concept of writing and training and all that kind of good stuff. Also, you know, it's just a great quality of life feature to be able to get a mount and start riding around super soon. Many MMOs these days now let you just ride on a mount right away, or you have to do a short quest line or something like that. So it's good to see that Blizzard is kind of jumping on the ball with that one and adding those quality of life features. Next up, so speed leveling in Shadowlands. Someone has actually leveled from 1 to 50, so from the start up to where you would start doing Shadowlands, in 6 hours and 54 minutes, which has halved the previous record of 12 hours, and it's only getting faster. So this is obviously not the average case, the average situation or circumstance. The average person is not going to get on here and level from 1 to 50 in 7 hours. This is someone who power levels, speed levels, but this is kind of a decent judge for how long it could possibly take to level. And 7 hours to get from 1 to 50 is pretty good. And his previous record was 12 hours, so he was able to shave 5 hours off of it. That is fairly significant, which means by the time we actually get to Shadowlands and the game's officially launched and we have a updated add-on for leveling and stuff like that, I could see 12 hours or even like 15 hours or something being a solid number to get from 1 to 50, and that's a lot better than what it currently is. So good news. And there's more details in here about how he did it, in the methods that he used, if that's something that you're interested in. Next, NPCs now notice your presence in the Shadowlands alpha. So it looks like Blizzard has added a little bit of extra personality to the NPCs. They kind of did this in Battle for Azeroth. It was one of the cool things about the cities and stuff, is that instead of everyone standing around like a statue, you had people leaning on walls and, all that kind of good stuff. Well, they're taking that up to the next level now, and you can kind of see here in this image how as you get close to this NPC, he actually turns his head and looks at you. So this now kind of adds some extra life to the NPCs and makes them kind of acknowledge that you actually are around. So this is another step towards making cities and towns and things more interesting, more lively, and less like you're just walking through a level where they just plugged in NPC statues to give you quests. Next, Blizzard has confirmed that they have... Well, we'll read the post here. So, For a long time, we've seen a small number of players turn to third-party add-ons such as console ports, which I have used before, and it's a pretty sweet, kind of annoying add-on to use in order to work through certain accessibility issues. We always want to make WoW more widely accessible if possible, so in Shadowlands, we are attempting to add some support for keybinds, camera, and turning a character on controllers, such as the Xbox Adaptive Controller. We're glad the community has felt empowered to make add-ons tailored to specific needs like this, and we're going to continue to encourage that as best as we can. So basically what happens is they data mined some stuff in Shadowlands that was related to gamepad support, allowing players to assign keybinds to console controllers. And so this brought up the question of, hey, is Shadowlands coming to consoles? Are they developing, the alpha so that people are going to be able to play this with a controller? And that is always going to lead to the question of, hey, is this coming to consoles now? And they said, that's not exactly the intention. They didn't say, no, it's not coming to consoles. I imagine that's probably something they're going to want to do at some point. I don't know if Shadowlands is that point, but they just kind of confirmed hey, we want to make things more accessible. This is good news for me. I currently use Opie or CirclePie to help me with my sort of accessibility issues with WoW and allow me to play the game in a way that doesn't bother my nerve issues and carpal tunnel in my arms, and actually playing with a controller is significantly better than playing with mouse and keyboard, generally speaking. And one of the worries I've always had is, hey, what if Opie, loses support? What if they start updating it and I can't continue to use it? What am I going to do? And honestly, I prefer to use Opie, so I'll continue to use that for as long as I can. But if for some reason support for that stopped and I was no longer able to use it, it would be nice to know that I can, do some gamepad keybinds and stuff like that in order to continue to play the game in a way that's comfortable for me. Next up, Draenor and Broken Isles Pathfinder is not required. Kind of talked about this in the last Talking Head video, wondering if this was going to be the case, and it is not required. So this is pretty nice. So the way this is going to work is you'll learn how to fly in these expansion contents at level 30 when you train expert flying. Now, the achievements are still there, and with the achievements, you will get the associated rewards, which includes, sometimes it includes a mount. It also may include a speed increase as well. It says there's no mention of Battle for Azeroth Pathfinder Part 2 no longer being required for BFA flying, so you may change too much. And I was hoping that some of the tweaks and changes that they made would actually make Rogue play a little bit differently, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And there's nothing wrong with the current version of Rogue, but I think the changes with, like I said, Outlaw is what I like to play. And with Roll the Bones mechanically not looking as fun as it possibly could currently, and also with the removal of the stun from between the eyes, those are negatives, right? Those are negatives to me over the current state of Rogue. And the current state of Rogue is something that I play decently often, but definitely do not main. So this has dropped down to a tier 2 consideration. Now I just need to see what do they do with it between now and the actual release. Shaman, still looking good. Shaman is probably still a tier 1 consideration for main for me for Shadowlands. Although I think Monk is pretty significantly ahead of Shaman. Everything I've seen for Shaman so far seems to confirm the thoughts that I had in the previous video about Elemental, Resto, and enhancement. My particular lean in this case is towards enhancement, and that looks pretty good. In the alpha that people were putting out videos for, Wind Fury Totem was not working, which is a significant source of Wind Fury stacks in order to increase your DPS and stuff on the specialization. But even without Wind Fury Totem, it still was looking real good. So Shaman, I'm in the same spot. Like, it's still a tier 1 consideration. It's behind the monk pretty significantly, I think. But, all that takes is some tweaks here and there, or getting the chance to actually play and finding out which one actually is the most fun for me to play, and not just the most fun for me to think about playing, or try to play vicariously through other people's gameplay footage. Warlock is Warlock. The general feedback is that, yep, it still is what it is. If you like it in BFA, then it's pretty similar in Shadowlands. General feedback for Warrior is that Arms Warrior actually is pretty fun. I am interested to get my hands on that one, because I don't think that that's one that I am actually able to really connect to enough to decide whether or not I'd like to play it based on other people's feedback. I think I actually just need to get my hands on it. A lot of the abilities for arms and stuff I just kind of think are boring or not interesting to me in the way that I like to play. But apparently it's pretty fun. Fury also seems to be pretty fun as well. And the general feedback for Protection is that it feels squishy, really squishy compared to the other tanks. That is some numbers tweaking, but Preach's general feedback has been that, Warriors have been really, really good in BFA, and perhaps Blizzard is wanting to tone them down a little bit and give someone else the chance to shine. And so maybe that's why they are in the state that they're in, and why we should kind of hold our breath in terms of expecting Blizzard to make major changes that are going to change the survivability of the specialization. So, with all that stuff said, tier 1, I have Monk and Shaman. Tier 2, I've got Paladin and possibly Rogue. And that's about it. Everything else is, I have to play it. I have to try it out, see how fun it actually is. Or wait and see, the combinations of class, specialization, covenant abilities, soulbind, all that kind of stuff, like how that's all going to work. Because I do think that currently, like, evaluating these just on the basis of the core class is good, because we need to look at how good of a job Blizzard is doing with these class changes, because the thing to keep in mind here is these class changes, this is what's going forward into the expansion after Shadowlands. So we want these to be good, but at the same time, if you're looking at these and you're not taking into account the talent trees, which there are changes to those, the Covenant signature abilities, the Covenant class abilities, and the Soulbind system, it's kind of like trying to look at a class at the beginning of Legion and compare that, and try to figure out what do you want to main without taking the Legion artifact weapon and all that stuff into account as well. Because all those different things, while I think on their own may not be incredibly significant, in combination with each other, they are going to be very significant. I mean, you're talking about 2 active abilities, a separate talent tree, your talent build, like all that stuff is going to be in there, and that's going to make a significant difference. So just on the base level, that's where I'm at. 2 in tier 1, 2 in tier 2. Everything else is kind of falling below that, and we'll see. All right, so that's my update on my class thoughts and where I'm at with general impressions for the classes in Shadowlands. So next thing we're going to do is talk about Torghast, and then we're going to talk about the Covenants and Soulbinds. So these actually, I don't know that they're going to take super long. But Torghast, we talked about it in the last video. If you don't know what it is the roguelike style tower that's being introduced in Shadowlands. It is my number 1 most anticipated feature about Shadowlands. It's the thing that I think could actually bring me back to WoW enough to actually not just play the expansion just for the heck of it, but to actually want to make content and really get back into the game. We've been seeing more and more about the tower. They recently unlocked access to the tower in the alpha, and I have watched some of the gameplay footage of the tower and have some thoughts and opinions. So in general, I want to talk about the tower, and I also do want to talk a little bit about what I think Blizzard needs to do in order to make this a success, and what they're possibly doing that will make this not as fun as it could be. So we took a look at this before, but a quick recap on the tower. The tower is roguelike style, which means you'll go in, you'll try to clear as many floors as you can, and when you die, your progress is reset, you start all over, and as you climb those floors, the content that you are completing is randomized. So the layout of the floor is randomized, the enemies are randomized, the powers and abilities that you can get are randomized. So it's a different experience every time. You're not going to go in and go, okay, well, I need to go down the left path and I need to pick this power and this boss is coming up, so I need to do this. You're going to go in and go, well, what the heck's going on? I don't know. How are things going to go? I love roguelike systems, so I'm super excited about this. Now, the tower can be played with 1 to 5 players, so you can go in solo, and then your run is set based on the number of deaths that you have. So on each floor, you can die a certain number of times before the Terragru, which is a giant monster that basically just comes out and wipes your whole party, finds you, and that will end your run. So if you are solo, you can die 3 times per floor, and then the number of times increases based on the number of players in your party. So at max, if you have 5 players in a party, your party is allowed to die 11 times per floor. Now, this does appear to be your party has 11 total deaths, not your party can wipe 11 times. So what this means is if you have one person in your party who just dies over and over and over again, they can take up 6, 8, 9 of these times that you're allowed to die and just eat those up right away. If your whole party wipes, it does eat up 5 of those available deaths. So you have 2 full party wipes plus 1 essentially per floor. That's what it looks like in its current state. So it's a number of deaths, not full party wipes. So when you do reach the cap, that spawns the Terragru in 30 seconds, and you basically have the Terragru will start at the beginning of the floor, and he'll start moving towards the end of the floor. If you can get off the floor before he shows up, you're good to go. You're on to the next floor. However, if he catches up to you, like I said, he just kind of destroys your party, and that is the end of your run. So you have 11 deaths before you have to worry about that. And once you hit those 11 deaths in a 5-player party, then you have to worry about, okay, well, he's showing up in 30 seconds. He's going to start hunting us down. Can we get out of here before then? Along the way, you are going to be selecting Anima Powers. So you get one of these when you first go into the tower, and then you'll get one, I believe, after like every boss fight on the floor. And then occasionally you can get these from dropping out of like chests or enemies. And these are kind of the extra element of the roguelike system. And these are the things that I think are going to really make the tower fun, because if you were just to go into the tower as your normal class and try to get as far as you can, like, that's not bad. But the thing that I like about this is that you do get these powers, and these powers let you do stuff with your class that you cannot do anywhere else. They break your class, they make you do super OP, crazy stuff, and that's incredibly fun, I think. So you'll see these little orbs, and these are where you get the Anima Powers from normally. And when you click the orb, you get a choice between 1 to 3 Anima Powers. So each power has a rarity that affects how often it shows up and possibly how powerful it is, and you will choose the one that you want. So, for example, we have a choice between 2 abilities here for the Demon Hunters. So you have Cadaverous Eye. It says your Eye Beam cooldown is reduced by 85% during metamorphosis. Now, when you choose this, you have that like passive ability, this kind of like mini talent for the entirety of the rest of the run. So the entire until your party wipes or, you know, gets taken out by the Terragru or whatever, you have this ability. And you'll get another one and another one and another one. And these all stack up. They all add up. They all work together. The other ability here is the Fellborn Pendant. It says your first Chaos Strike on a floor deals an additional 750% damage. So these will pop up and you'll pick one. And maybe if it's the first choice, then you want to go with the one that is the more rare one. Because it's less likely to show up later. Or maybe you say, hey, you know, this time when I go in for a run, I want to try to take all the Chaos Strike Anima Powers I can and just get a ridiculous Chaos Strike. Like, those considerations are going to come up when you're doing these runs, and that's going to make things pretty fun. We have another example here of a set of 3, and these could be for any class, I think. These are all pretty generic. You have the Abundance of Phantasma. This just gives you 300 Phantasma, which is a currency that you're able to use in the tower to spend at vendors. And you also do have some of your Anima Powers will change your abilities so that they consume Phantasma as a resource instead of whatever your normal resource is. So this is both a currency for spending at vendors and a potential resource for your abilities, depending on the abilities you pick up. Secret Spices says killing a Maw Rat. A Maw Rat is like a critter, really, you know, super low health animal. Will increase your maximum health by 2% up to 100%. So if you kill 50 of these little critters, then you can have 100% maximum health increased. Crown of Obstinance says enemies within 15 yards have their casting speed reduced by 30%. So once again, just a nice passive ability. And you'll have these for the entirety of your run. And you will see those in a little UI element. So you can see here, this person is on floor 31. They have 841 anima. They've died 0 out of 3 times, and they have 31 different anima powers. And you could see that some of these anima powers are stacking multiple times. So there's not 31 individual, but they still do have, 23? Like 23 individual anima powers. And think about that. Think about I-beam cooldowns reduced by 85% during metamorphosis, right? That could be one of these. And they could have the first Chaos Strike does 750% damage. And they could have the reduced casting speed. So as you progress through the floors, you're going to get more and more and more of these, and they're going to stack. They're going to get better. You're going to have multiple effects going on all at the same time. And all of a sudden, you are nothing like the character that exists outside of the tower. And the next time through, you could get totally different powers, totally different, like stacks of those powers. You can change things up. If you go in as a different specialization, those are different powers. You go in as a different class, those are different powers. So really exciting, really interesting stuff. This kind of reminds me of I think it's a tower in Final Fantasy XIV, where essentially you just play through like randomly generated floors. You go through and you fight random enemies, and the difficulty gets progressively higher, but along the way, you don't get anima powers, but you do get these little like one-off items, abilities that you can use that do something special. Like one of them, I think, turns all the enemies like into frogs or something and makes it so they can't actually attack back when you attack them. And as you go through that tower, you learn where to use those items to give you the biggest advantage. And this is kind of like that. You're progressing through the tower, you're progressing through the floors, and instead of trying to figure out when to use these items, you're just getting these passive anima abilities, and that's changing the way that you play your class. And they show here that with enough anima powers, you can have up to 2 talents on every row, because some of the anima powers are just straight up talents. This is a little example of the vendor and some of the stuff that you can get from the vendor. So right here we have a Ravenous Anima Cell. It says transform any non-elite enemy into an Anima Cell. So you will be able to spend the anima on some of those items, kind of like the stuff that I talked about in the Final Fantasy Tower. Also, the floor layout is randomly generated, and there are bonus objectives that you can complete in order to collect a bonus Anima orb to get a bonus Anima ability. So this is looking really, really, really fun, really interesting. The feedback across the board has been that Torghast is fun as hell. And that is really good to see. Now, there are some things that Blizzard could do to kind of screw this up that I hope they don't. We had a little bit of a live blog of an interview that someone did about Torghast and the Maw, which is the in-game zone. And we didn't get a whole lot of stuff. There was a lot of, we don't know, we're not sure yet, the typical stuff. But we did get some kind of key information here. So keys for Torghast, because you will need keys, and that's one of the ways they can screw it up, is by not giving you enough keys or whatever. It says your keys can technically be infinitely farmed, but you'll need to do more than just Torghast to get it. So this is the first way I think they can screw up Torghast, which is by not making it something you can just go do. By making you farm keys, do content you don't want to do in order to do the content that you do want to do. I hate this in World of Warcraft. It drives me nuts. It's the same thing with like, oh, you want this particular, essence for, your cloak or whatever. Then you have to go do PvP. Oh, what's that? You hate PvP? Tough. That's the only way you can get that essence. I hate when they do stuff like this. And it looks like that is the plan for Torghast. So that is a knock on the tower already. One, the fact that you have to have keys and you can't just go do the damn thing because you want to and it's fun, but you need a key to go do it for whatever stupid reason. But also, you can't just get keys by doing the tower. You have to go do other stuff. I get the game design decision behind it. I just think it's stupid. You'll be able to enter the tower shortly after you hit level 60, so you won't be able to get into the tower until max level. There's probably not a lot of equipable gear that has an item level in Torghast. It's mostly for legendaries and freed souls. Legendaries, there's some kind of legendary crafting system going on in the Torghast Tower. We'll have to look into that. And then also freed souls is some type of resource or currency that's used by your covenants. Now, once again, this is another way I think they could potentially screw this up by not giving you enough reward for doing Torghast. Like, it has to be fun, but there also needs to be like a reason to do it, like whether that's achievements, gear. I mean, they have the legendaries here, but at some point, I imagine you hit a point where either trying to grind for these legendaries is just something that is super tedious and takes forever, or you got all the legendaries that you wanted, and now you're just doing it for no particular reason. I think having gear that scales with the floor level that you can get to, trinkets, rings, any of that kind of stuff could definitely help in that aspect. Torghast has tech to scale mobs by role and even by spec, but with Anima Powers, they're not sure if it's needed. So this is something we were wondering about, like, how's Torghast going to be if you want to go in and solo as a healer? Well, they have the technology to scale the enemies based on the specialization that you're playing. So if you are playing as like a holy priest or something and you're worried about being able to kill enemies and stuff, they can technically go in there and scale things so that for that particular specialization, the enemies are different or not as strong as maybe they would be for a DPS character. However, with the Anima Powers, they think that you're going to have enough OP stuff going on that that's not going to be necessary. And we have seen stuff like Priest that can one-shot bosses with their Shadow Word Pain. So, as a healer, you still have access to Shadow Word Pain. So if you can get those Anima Powers and gear them towards that, then you could potentially, one-shot bosses with that, and all of a sudden, now it's not a big deal that you are a healer. And this is something that I thought they could do with the Anima Powers potentially anyway, which is either Just make one that changes a healing ability into a damaging ability, or one that really amps up a damaging ability and makes it absolutely ridiculous. So that's one of the ways they could help healers out in the tower. A soft timer per floor might be added so that people don't feel incentivized to only pull with cooldowns up. That's whatever. I think it's stupid. I think you should just let people play the tower the way they want to play the tower. I mean, the trade-off to pulling only with your cooldowns up is it takes more time. So people that are going to play this style where they're not waiting for cooldowns to be up anyway are going to go faster. They're going to get more runs in potentially. So I don't know. That kind of comes back around to the keys and how many keys you can get. I mean, if you can only get 3 keys a week to run the tower, then yeah, maybe you do want to stop people from, waiting for cooldowns to be up before they pull, because if you only get to do it 3 times a week, it's not a big deal for you to wait. But if you can play a ton of these in a week, then you are incentivized to just keep going and not waiting for cooldowns on every pull, because you can get more runs in a week. So we'll see. Torghast is going to stick around for the entire expansion with new floors, legendaries, themes, and ecologies. Themes are basically like the floor layouts. Ecologies are like the monster groups that you can get as well. You may see some important souls in Torghast, as that's where the jailer keeps his most prized souls. And then they briefly touched on the Maw. So this one I wanted to scroll down to if we have it. Here we go. Don't forget to like the stream if you're enjoying it. Let YouTube know you're having fun. So the Maw's an in-game zone. You'll be there a little bit during your leveling experience. Dailies and world quests will be present, but when you start, there will be a very few to help you know what to focus on. There's a limited amount of time that you can spend in the Maw because there's a debuff called Eye of the Jailer. As you defeat things and spend time there, the jailer will find you, and towers will start to bombard you, and chains will slow you. So it seems like you're only going to spend a certain amount of time in the Maw, because the more time you spend, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse for you, and you're going to start taking damage and getting debuffs and all this kind of stuff. Now, there are some things apparently you can do, such as get a shroud that hides you from the jailer in the zone. You can also spin Anima, which you collect outside of the Maw in the tower, possibly other areas, we don't know, to remove the Eye of the Jailer debuff. This sounds weird. I don't know why the hell they're doing this. It just sounds... Maybe thematically it'll make sense, but it just sounds dumb. I don't know. Once again, it sounds like they are trying to force you into playing content that they want you to play and not having fun when you're just having fun. What if you're in the in-game Maw and you just want to go out there and farm world quest all day? Like, that's what you want to do. You want to sit down with a beer or something and just go farm world quest all day, or rep or something, and you're in this in-game zone, and they just make it incredibly difficult for you to do that because of this Eye of the Jailer debuff. And then if you want to get rid of it, you're like, well, I got to go do something else to get Anima just so I can come back and get rid of this. But I don't know. It sounds really dumb. I don't like the potential that I'm seeing here between the keys for Torghast and the Eye of the Jailer buff for the Maw. These just sound like crappy, anti-fun systems for the player. So we'll have to see. It may not be that bad. It's all in the numbers, right? If you only have 3 keys for Torghast in a week, and then you have to farm, for hours to get another key, that's going to feel really bad. If you have like 10 keys for Torghast for the week, and then you have to farm more than that, that might not be so bad, right? That's a Torghast run a day plus some extra. So it really comes down to the numbers. Same thing with the Eye of the Jailer. If it's like, hey, you've been here for an hour, so now we're going to start shooting you and slowing you down with chains, that's really bad. If it's like, hey, you've been in here for 10 hours straight, and that's a little much, also not quite as bad. So I do think it all comes down to the numbers. All right, moving on. We have the Covenant abilities for Shadowlands Alpha. Some updated ones, some new ones on the list. So, new Covenant abilities have been data mined that were previously work in progress. Now, I'm going to have a different stream where we're going to go through the different class Covenant abilities and all that kind of stuff here. We're going to do that separately. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I do want to look at all those individual class abilities. I'm just kind of waiting for the majority of them to be out. But what I did want to take a look at here is the Covenant signature abilities, because we have some actual numbers here. So we have the Kyrian Summon Steward ability. So this is instant cast, 5-minute cooldown, and lasts for 3 minutes. So it does sound kind of like a bling vendor or something like that. So the steward's going to bring you the Vial of Serenity that can be consumed to restore 15% of your health. Sounds like it's a potion that you get to pick up from him, like you would pick something up from Bling Vendor, and then you can store it and use it later. It doesn't sound like this is something that happens right away. The steward also offers access to a selection of useful amenities once per day. So he's going to be out for 3 minutes, and you can resummon him every 5 minutes. The Venthyr Door of Shadows. So we talked about this one a little bit. So this one has a 35-yard range, 1.5-second cast, and a 1-minute cooldown. This sounds so boring. Like, look at look at the amount of detail. Like, this is 3 lines. This one's 3 lines. This one's 4 lines. And this one is 1.5 lines. I don't know. This sounds super boring. Ugh. I hope this is cooler than they're making it out to be. Like, if you can go through walls and stuff like that, that would be pretty interesting. I don't know how that would work with targeting, though. Necrolord, so they have the Bone Shield kind of ability here. Says it's most effective against powerful enemies. It has a 10-yard range, 4-second channel, which is pretty significant, actually, and a 2-minute cooldown. The 4-second channel, though, that's the actual ability itself. So this is a little bit different. It says form a shield of flesh and bone over 4 seconds. So it kind of originally sounded like you would hit this and it would just make a shield and you would just have that shield for the duration, but you actually have to channel it. So that does make this significantly different, I think. You just have to stand in place and channel the shield, and for the duration of the channel, you have the shield. So also, 20% of your maximum health is the default, and channeling near a corpse will increase the shield up to 50% of your maximum health. And then the Night Fae has the shape-shifting movement ability, so that this turns you into a Vulpin and increases your movement speed. You can reactivate it to teleport you 10 yards forward. You can get your cosmetics, all that kind of good stuff. So there is a 12-second duration in the open world, which is actually really good. Like 12 seconds is pretty good. It doesn't say how much movement speed increase you get, but I mean, 12 seconds is pretty long. You're going to get to wherever you're trying to go within 12 seconds. So this sounds basically kind of like Ghost Wolf for shamans. It sounds really nice. I think this is this is the kind of thing where I would go, even though I think I like Venthyr or Necrolord as a Death Knight Covenant ability. Having something like this Night Fae ability on a Death Knight would be amazing because their mobility sucks. And having a 12-second duration movement speed buff on a 1.5-minute cooldown is so good. So good for something like a Death Knight. But I hate the way the Night Fae Covenant looks. So will I get this ability? Probably not. Even though it's really good. Like, this once again, like I said, this comes down to the lose-lose situation with the Covenant abilities, both the signature and class ones, where there's this contradiction between the mechanics of the ability itself and also all the cosmetic and thematic aspects of the individual covenants. You know, like I think Venthyr and Necrolord looks super cool for a Death Knight character, but I think Soul Shape might be one of the best abilities for a Death Knight because that movement is pretty significant. It's a pretty big deal. So what do I do? And, that's just kind of a, personal, what's the word I'm looking for? Convenience opinion, but there are going to be situations where it's not about movement speed. It's about, hey, this is the best ability to take into a raid or dungeon. So even if you love the idea of being a Night Fae Druid, if you're a Guardian Druid, you got to go Necrolord because that's the best tanking ability that you can get. And we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But I just wanted to cover these. Like I said, we'll look at the other ones more in detail as we get them. It does look like we have the majority of them here, but there's so much content and so much to look at in these that I think it needs to be a separate video. So we're going to do that in a separate video. All right, and then the last thing we're going to talk about today is the Soulbinds. So we have calculators for the Soulbinds. We touched on this a little bit more, or a little bit in the previous video, but we can actually go in here now and look at the talent trees. So we currently have the 3 Soulbinds for Necrolord and Night Fae, and 1 for the Venthyr. Now each covenant is going to have 3 different characters that you can soulbind to. And so we have all the Necrolord and Night Fae ones, 1 Venthyr, and oddly enough, no Bastion, even though that's the Covenant and zone that's currently playable in the alpha. So we could take a look at these and we could see that first off, the layout of the Soulbinds is different for each one. So they don't have a common layout. I think this is cool. I think this is actually really nice. I don't know that it matters in the long run because you're going to look at this and go, okay, Necrolord, yep, I want to have the, Imini Soulbind. And then at that point, you're just in this talent tree, right? So it's all about how do you path through this talent tree. So I don't know that it's just nice that they didn't make this super generic, like just changing the layout of the talents themselves from each Soulbind is enough, I think, to show like, hey, we didn't just go, okay, yeah, I got 3 at the top and then 2 and 1 and then 2 and 3 again. It's a little more interesting. Now we do have some little icons on these slots here, these conduit slots. The shield is kind of like a survivability slot. The lightning bolt is like a utility slot. And then the cross swords is a damage sort of increase slot. And within these, you are able to plug in something. We're not entirely sure yet, but basically these are spaces for you to plug things in that are not just straight up talents on the board. So we're going to look through these real quick and just take a look at some of the examples of the abilities that they currently have in here. And what I really want to focus on is how interesting these are and where the choices come up, like how much variety can you actually have. I think this is a decent one to start on as well. So we're going to get into this in just a second. I'm going to hydrate and let you know again, if you're enjoying the stream, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, let YouTube know that you're enjoying it. Okay, so we have Bonesmith Hiremere. I don't know if I said that right. So really all we have to look at here are the ones with the pictures. We can kind of see how the path would go down as well. But like I said, these are just empty slots for you to plug things into. So first we have Serrated Spalders. Inflict 485 shadow damage to your attacker over 5 seconds when hit at melee range. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I think we need to pay attention to here. The two things that I'm always looking for. One, do I get an active ability that I can incorporate into my gameplay that's actually going to change what I'm doing? And two, do I get passive abilities that drastically can change the way that I use an ability, perform my rotation, or play my character? Okay? If those are present, then I think we're looking at a system that is good and will change, will improve the gameplay of your character. If not, it still might be a good effect, but it doesn't actually do anything. This is an example of the latter. So inflicting 485 shadow damage to your attacker over 5 seconds when you're hit at melee range, generally speaking, is not going to change the way that I play my character, right? If I'm playing on a ranged character, I'm probably not going to take Serrated Spalders because it doesn't make sense, unless I decide that I'm going to change the entire role of my specialization and now I'm going to be a melee fire mage because I want people to punch me for 485 additional shadow damage. Most likely you're going to pick this on a class or specialization where you get hit in melee range already, right? And then this doesn't do anything, right? You get hit, it deals damage, it's a nice effect, but it doesn't actually change the way that you think about how you play your character. Now, not every single thing in a talent build needs to be something active, something that changes your gameplay, right? Nice effects like this are fine, especially at the start of the talent tree. But what we want to look for as we get further down is, do those types of abilities come into play? Because if not, then this basically could just be on a piece of gear, right? So our other option here is Resourceful Flesh Crafting. Defeating an enemy reduces Fleshcraft's cooldown by 1 second. So once again, nothing crazy here. But there's a choice to be made, right? Do I want to deal additional damage to my attackers, or do I want to reduce the cooldown of Fleshcraft, which is the Covenant signature ability, so that I can use it more often, right? There's a little bit of a choice there, right? The choice itself kind of presents a gameplay change. Like, do I want to use the shield more often, or do I just want to output more damage? These aren't interesting on their own, but when you take the choice into consideration, it's not awful. And then based on that, you can plug in your conduit, and it looks like these do have some little passives. So if you take the utility one, your movement speed is increased by 6%. And if you take the defensive one, your damage taken is reduced by 3%. Now, after you click on these, you're going to get down to this middle one where you're going to put this in and get your damage and healing increased by 4%. So then we take on the second tier of actual abilities here. So we have Hiremere's Arsenal, Ravenous Pendant. Defeating an enemy restores 1% of your maximum health after 3 seconds and stacks to 5. Gore Stompers. Damaging or healing a target below 35% grants you 25% increased movement speed for 5 seconds. May only occur once per minute. After landing, this is Marrowed Gemstone. After landing 10 critical strikes, you gain 20% increased critical strike for 10 seconds. This may only occur once per 1 minute. So once again, these are all kind of passive, do what you're already doing sort of builds. The one you pick will be likely based on what you do already or the effect that you like, not necessarily, hey, I want to take this one because I'm going to change the way my class plays. Jumping down, we have Bone Spurs. Your mounted movement speed is increased by 5%. If attacked while mounted, mounted movement speed is increased by an additional 10% for 30 seconds. Now, this one I actually really like. It doesn't change the way that you play your character, but it drastically changes a mechanic in the game. So you get a passive 5% mounted movement speed. Then if you get hit, you get 10% additional speed for 30 seconds. So instead of getting dazed, you go even faster. That's cool. That actually, it doesn't change the way you play your character, but it changes the way you can navigate the world. Now you're less concerned about getting smacked when you're trying to run from point A to point B. That's kind of neat. Then we have smithing expertise. You gain mining materials from completing dungeons, raids, battlegrounds, and arenas while soulbound. Once again, that's also really cool. Like, these aren't changing the way you play the character, but that's cool. Like, completing dungeons, raids, battlegrounds, and arenas gets you mining materials. That's interesting. This is something that I kind of like. This is the opposite of what we were talking about for the tower, where you're forced to go do things you don't want to do in order to do the things you want to do. This is like, hey, if you pick this, you just can get materials for doing the other things you want to do. You don't like going to gather materials? Run a bunch of dungeons if that's what you like doing, because you're going to get many materials from doing that. It might not be enough to actually let you, just do that and not have to go gather, but it could. It depends on the numbers. Once again, that's interesting. And then the final one, upon death, your armor animates you for 10 seconds, allowing you to attack and use some spells and abilities as if alive. So I don't think this really changes your gameplay. It's just a nice perk, knowing that, okay, at the end of, if you die, if you wipe or whatever during the dungeon or a raid, you've got that additional 10 seconds to keep doing some abilities, kind of like the Holy Priest angelic ability. It's neat. Imini is the next one up. Let's see if these get any more interesting or if they're all kind of this passive ability throughout. So, Imini's magnificent skin. Okay. When you use her Necrolord class ability or spell, gain a stack of Imini's magnificent skin, stacking up to 4 times. Using Fleshcraft consumes those stacks to increase your maximum health by 5% for 2 minutes. So this might encourage you to use your Necrolord class ability or spell a little bit more often, or it could change the timing of when you use your Fleshcraft. So this actually is an example of an ability that does make those kind of changes before, because maybe you just use Fleshcraft on cooldown if you don't have something like this, when it makes sense. But now if you pick up this ability, instead you're trying to get to the 4 stacks of Imini's magnificent skin in order to have an additional larger shield. So this is the kind of thing that can change the way that you think about how you use your abilities and how you play your character. So probably one of the most interesting ones in terms of gameplay we've seen so far. After taking falling damage, the health loss becomes a shield, lasting 30 seconds. I am trying to think of a situation where you want that or care about that. I mean, if you take fall damage, yeah, maybe it's like a raid or a dungeon sort of thing it can be useful for. You may attune your Hearth Kidney Stone to any resting location and return to it. 24-hour cooldown, which is reduced by 5 minutes every killing blow. So 24-hour cooldown is ridiculous, but 5-minute reduction per kill is actually, that's not bad. So yeah, that's not bad at all, actually. Kill like 12 enemies and you have reduced it by an hour. I mean, you're going to kill way more than 12 enemies in an average hour anyway, so you're going to drastically reduce this. Also, it says that you can attune it to any resting location, so that's actually pretty significant, because a lot of times these Hearthstone type abilities just attune to what your current normal Hearthstone is. Like the Shaman one is just like a extra Hearthstone. It attunes to the same place. This looks like you can attune it to someplace separate. If that's the actual case, that's going to be interesting. Also, it's going to be weird to do that at an NPC, to walk up and be like, hey, I'd like to attune my Hearth Kidney Stone. I'd like to make this my home location for my Kidney Stone. It's weird. Movement speed increased by 2% for every nearby enemy, up to 10%. That might actually be really good for running old raids. Like, you just get a pack of enemies on you and you don't kill them, you just run. Run with them from one room to the... Yeah, that actually could be really good for running like legacy raids. Gnashing Chompers gain 1% haste for 20 seconds after defeating an enemy, up to 5%. And Sulfuric Emission, when reduced below 20% health, you fear nearby enemies for 3 seconds. So once again, these are just kind of like passive sort of whatever abilities. I think the one thing I will say about these is I do think these are more interesting than a lot of the ones we've seen before. Like, this is just a passive ability, but fearing enemies when you drop below 20% health is definitely a lot more interesting than you gain +5 strength, right? It's still a passive ability. It doesn't really change how you're playing your character, but it's definitely feels like more of a choice than +5 strength, +5 intellect, or +5, stamina or whatever. And then the last ability, Rune Scribe Bone. Each enemy you defeat grants you 1 stack of Rune Scribe Bone, reducing magic damage taken by 1% for 30 seconds. At 5 stacks, your Soulbind traits are empowered for 30 seconds. Interesting. Okay, this guy is a lot more interesting than the other one, I think, and just in terms of mechanics. So, defeating an enemy is going to get you a stack. At 5 stacks, so after you defeat 5 enemies, you get powered up. So then your Magnificent Skin, releasing the stacks, deals shadow damage to nearby enemies, increased by 1% per stack. Okay, so 5%. Your legs, the shield amount is doubled from the fall damage. Your Kidney Stone, your cooldown reduction is doubled. Your Gristled Toes, movement speed now increased by 3% up to 25%. The haste from Gnashing Chompers is doubled, and the fear duration is increased by 2 seconds. This is really cool, actually. Like, this is the kind of stuff I like to see, where all of a sudden you have to start thinking about things. You're like, okay, depending on what you have here, every time you kill 5 enemies, like, it changes the ability to do something. Like, it's not even like, if you look at it, like some of them, like the shield amount being doubled, the cooldown reduction being doubled, those are fine. But this one with the skin is really interesting because now when you release the stacks, you deal shadow damage on top of getting the normal shield. That's cool. That's cool. This is definitely a little more interesting. I'm not saying that I don't like this one over here, because some of these passive effects are actually pretty nice. But just in terms of like mechanically, like this one seems pretty interesting. Hey Mac, it reminds me of the Volpera Racial Make a Camp, I think it's called, the extra Hearthstone ability that is. Oh yeah. I need to, who? Somebody, I don't, was it you or was it was somebody else? Somebody on the last stream told me I look like a Volpera dude. I was mildly offended. I do think they have cool racial abilities though. All right, let's look at Plague Deviser Merileth. Using Fleshcraft, the Covenant signature ability, with nearby corpses derives a benefit from a corpse differing based on the creature's type. That's neat. I like that a lot, actually. That's pretty cool because Man, this is interesting. If you're fighting multiple types of enemies, do you try to like stand on top of a particular corpse to get a particular benefit? This is interesting. I think like this changes what you're doing potentially. It depends on the benefits that you get from the corpse, like how weird they are. Like if it's just like, oh, well, if you're standing on top of a skeleton, you get plus stamina. If you're standing on top of a bird, you get plus movement speed or something. Like that's not as interesting, but this could get really weird. It sounds cool, actually. It does sound cool. Travel with Bloop. While standing still, you slowly build stacks of Bloop's Wanderlust. At 10 stacks, your movement speed is increased by 10% for 2 minutes. I wonder how long you have to stand still. 10% movement speed increase is actually not bad for 2 minutes. I would take that on a Death Knight. I would take that on a Paladin for sure. Ooze, maybe? Ooze. Frictionless coating. When reduced below 50% health, Ooze courses over you, granting you a shield for 10% of your maximum health for 20 seconds. Okay. Plague's Preemptive Strike. Your first attack or spell on an enemy increases your damage done to them by 10% for 5 seconds. Doesn't occur if Plague is busy preemptively striking another target. Okay, so this is good, like single target stuff. So this actually does potentially change, maybe. Maybe not. I mean, it could. I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking like Fire Mage. Like, what if I want to open with a Pyroblast? Well, this changes the way that I want to do that, because if I hit them with like a Flame Blast, like instant cast ability, then go into Pyroblast, I'm going to get 10% increased damage on that Pyroblast. So maybe that does kind of change the way that I'm playing a little bit. Maybe like in an open world situation where I do want to kind of preemptively. I wonder if it counts auto attacks. Like if you auto attack, you run up and you just swing with your sword, does that increase? Either way, I mean, it's not drastically crazy, but it is still kind of interesting. Kevin's Keyring allows opening of locks that require up to 600 skill. Okay. Each second spent channeling Fleshcraft reduces Kevin's Keyring's cooldown by 1 hour. Doesn't say what the cooldown is. I don't actually know if anyone is going to give a damn about this. Lock opening is not super useful most of the time unless they add a lot more of it in Shadowlands. Plagueborn Cleansing Slime, approximately 1 proc per minute. Defeating enemies has a chance to deploy your Plagueborn Cleansing Slime, which improves the remaining durability on your armor. Weird. Okay, like these abilities are not drastically changing the way that you're playing your character for the most part, but they are cool and they're weird, and they're doing something that I wanted them to do with these abilities anyway. I always say, stop giving me boring stat increases, give me weird utility stuff. And this is a weird utility thing, right? You defeat an enemy and approximately once per minute you deploy a slime, which increases the durability of your armor so you don't have to repair as much. No, it doesn't change the way you play your class, but it's also not boring. It's weird. It's interesting. It's cool, right? It's a cool effect to have. Like the one we had over here, the mounting speed being increased when you get attacked while mounting. Like that's also something that is cool, right? Doesn't drastically change the way you play your character, but it's just weird. It's cool. It's a nice little utility ability to have. I think this is such a better option than +5 strength. So, I mean, just based on the Necrolord ones here, I mean, I'm looking at these and I'm like, I don't know which Soulbind I would take. I think within each Soulbind, I kind of know what abilities I would take in general. But some of them are just like I would take this one over the lock one, you know, unless they drastically increase the amount of locks in Shadowlands. But I mean, then you also have to take in consideration this whole conduit system, because maybe I want to go this path so that I can put in the like damage reduction one. But I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. All right, and then ultimate form, Fleshcraft renders you immune to crowd control. Huh. Don't know how useful that's going to be. But I was looking at some of the footage for Shadowlands Alpha, and there did appear to be a number of enemies that had things that you needed to interrupt because they screwed you up. Some of that stuff might be CC, and if that's the case, then this could be cool. Also, this could be a potential like raid boss thing as well. All right, Night Fae. So this is the fairy druidy one that I tried not to be too hard on in the last video because I just generally don't like their aesthetic. But yeah, let's go. Dreamweaver, Field of Blossoms. When Soul Shape ends, so Soul Shape, the movement ability where you turn into a little Vulpine or whatever the heck it was called. You increase the attack speed and spell haste of all nearby allies by 20% for 15 seconds. Wow. That's actually pretty cool. Huh. Soul Shape lasts for 12 seconds. If you cast it again, it teleports you. I don't know. I wonder if you can just like attack and cancel it out. Because if you can, then now you're like weaving in these soul shapes to get that increased attack speed and spell haste. And 20% for 15 seconds is a lot. That is a lot. That's a really significant ability. All right, Social Butterfly. When at least 2 allies are within 8 yards, your versatility increases by 5% for 5 seconds. When this expires, 2 nearby allies gain this bonus for 5 seconds before passing it back to you. Aw, it's like the grouping ability. Hey, you're going to level with your friends? Be a Social Butterfly. Soothing Voice. When your roots, stuns, and incapacitating class effects in your target's movement speed is reduced by 90%, decaying rapidly over 2 seconds. Seems like a solid PvP pickup. Empowered Chrysalis. 10% of your overhealing received or done remains as a shield on the target for up to 15% of the caster's health, lasting for 5 seconds. Okay, nice healing ability. Also, good pickup for a tank if you wanted to go Dreamweaver. Fairy Dust. When falling farther than 20 yards, Fairy Dust slows your fall. Okay, that's cool. If I had this ability, I would literally just jump off of every cliff. I'd be like, I actually, yeah, that's kind of cool. It depends on if you drift like you do if you have Levitate on Priest, or if you just still drop straight down but slower. Yeah, that's actually kind of cool. Man, I was just thinking about this combined with the like fall damage thing. I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but you know, it's also 2 entirely different covenants, but I just kind of was thinking about the combo for that. Somnambulist. While rested, the player gains increased gold rewards. At level 60, resting grants the player Somnambulist, which increases gold rewards. Oh, okay, gotcha. So you can have 150% rested when you're not max level. Once you hit max level, you don't really get rested experience. So I'm wondering if the duration of the buff changes based on how long you've been resting on a max level character, or if it's just like a default, like, hey, you went into a rested town, you now have 20 minutes of the Somnambulist buff. Either way, like if that doesn't have like an internal cooldown, that's kind of cool. Like if you want to go out and gold farm, oh, this would be so good for legacy raids. for running the ones that have a high gold turnout, because you could just blow through those. Like I said, cool utility stuff. I actually am really liking some of these. And then finally, Pod Tender. When you would take damage that would kill you, instead rejuvenate within a pod, regaining 30% of HP over 10 seconds. If the pod takes more than 10,000 damage during this time, you die. This effect may only occur once every 30 minutes. So it's kind of like a forced, what's it called? The Shaman one, reincarnation in a way. That's actually neat. I wonder how good that will be. I wonder how hard it's going to be to take that 10,000 damage and die. I mean, with a 30-minute cooldown, I hope like 10,000 damage like is enough that the only way that you are going to die from that is if you're in a raid or PvP. I would hope. Corin? I'm going to go with Corin. That might not be how you actually say it. Oh, I kind of like the theme of this already. Don't forget to like the stream if you're having fun. Horn of the Wild Hunt. Soul Shape increases the movement speed of allies within 40 yards by 10%. Okay, cool. It's like a mini Savage Roar? Call the Wild? I don't remember. Stampeding Roar, right? Yeah, that's the Druid one, I think. Cool. Wild Hunt's charge. While out of combat, your Soul Shape's teleport becomes a charge, stunning your target for 2 seconds and ending your... Oh, that's so cool. I dig that. That is awesome. It's like Ghost Wolf with the leap. Oh, that's sweet. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's cool. Face your foes. When in front of your target, your spells and abilities decrease the damage they inflict on you by 2% for 3 seconds. So that's cool. That's like a positioning sort of ability. It does make you think a little bit more about how you play your class. You know, traditionally, for some classes, you kind of do want to get behind the target for whatever reason. That's a nice solid tanking ability. I mean, usually you want to have the target facing you, or they're going to be facing you when you're tanking, and then casting your spells and abilities gives you some additional damage reduction. That's pretty cool. Damaging an enemy before they damage you increases your critical strike by 10% for 10 seconds. That already sounds like a great like fire mage or hunter type ability. Cool. Sorry about my dogs in the background. Hold the line. After 5 seconds standing still, you take 10% less physical damage until you move. Once again, seems like another good... That's actually like solid for tanking, but that can be solid for some of the range characters with less mobility as well. Vorkai Sharpening Techniques. Your weapon takes no durability damage. Okay. Get in formation. Your mounted movement speed is increased by 3%. Allies behind you within 40 yards gain this benefit. Oh, that's that's kind of cool. That's neat. This is very thematic too. And final moments. Your healing and damage to targets below 35% health is increased by 3%. When an ally dies, this benefit is increased by 500% for 30 seconds. Holy cow. This enchantment may only occur once every 5 minutes. This one has a couple interesting things, but also like just some generally like, I don't know. I wasn't excited about most of these. This final moments is insane, especially for pushing content when you know people are going to die anyway. I really like this charge ability. And these all seem fairly solid as well. Just not quite as interesting. All right, and then we have Nia. The last one for the Night Fae. Sylvari Mantle. When Soul Shape ends, you are concealed until you move. Okay, so it's like a weird version of the Night Elf racial ability. Stay on the move. Defeating an enemy reduces Soul Shape's cooldown by 1 second. I like that. Get to move a lot more. Man, what the heck? All right, I like the ability and some of the modifications to it that you can get for the Night Fae, but I really don't like them cosmetically. It's a weird position to be in. Kind of figured I'd end up here. Naya's tools. So we got a series of her tools, or Naya, whatever, I'm gonna say Naya. Spurs. Approximately 1.7 procs per minute. Your damaging attacks and spells have a chance to toss Naya's spiked burr trap under your target. The burr latches onto the first enemy to cross them, reducing movement speed by 20% and inflicting nature damage over 5 seconds. So I'm guessing she's some kind of like hunter. Poison. Your interrupts apply Naya's paralytic poison to your target, dealing nature damage over 30 seconds. Targets with Naya's paralytic poison take additional nature damage if interrupted again. Okay. Then herbs. Your helpful spells have a chance to apply Naya's invigorating herbs, increasing the target's haste for 20 seconds. Okay, so these are actually really specific. Like one's your damaging attacks and spells. One is your interrupts, so your CC, crowd control, sort of utility abilities. And the other is your helpful healing sort of spells. So that's cool. I think that could potentially change the way that you go about your, playing your character, potentially. Or you may just like go into the one that you're doing the most. Like, hey, I'm DPS, I'm gonna get burrs. Hey, I'm a healer, I'm gonna get herbs. Care package. Naya periodically sends you crafting materials to aid you, increasing for every dungeon, raid, battleground, in arena completed while soulbound. Oh, so this is like, I wonder if these crafting materials are based on the ones that you have, or if they're just like a generic package full of like miscellaneous ones. That's pretty cool. Swift patrol. Movement speed increased by 20% for 2 minutes after defeating an enemy. Wow, that is a long time. Oh, combat cancels this effect. So it's probably not 2 minutes. It's probably more like 3 seconds or 10 seconds. This would be really nice to have in dungeons though, because you kill a pack of enemies, and then when you're running to the next room, you've got 20% increased movement speed the whole time. It's interesting. I don't know if I would take that over just like getting crafting materials. I think it depends on how periodically. If this is like once a day, then yeah, maybe I would take this. Or, you can change up your Soulbind build, so maybe I'd respec into this. I don't know. If you run a bunch of dungeons, Swift Patrol is useful. But if you run a bunch of dungeons, you get more out of your care package. I don't know, it's interesting choices. Cycle of Seasons is the last one here. Gain an increase to haste, critical strike, versatility, or mastery. As you deal damage and heal, the increase cycles to the next benefit. Yeah, so that's kind of boring, but it might change what you're doing based on a couple of things here. So it depends if it's like, hey, I have haste, and I have the haste for like 10 seconds. And then when that goes away, the next ability I do gives me crit for 10 seconds. And then when that goes away, if it's like, hey, I deal damage and I have haste for my next ability, and then when I hit, it changes to crit. And then when I hit, it changes to versatility. I think that's a little less interesting than having the windows of like a buff. Because if you do hit and it gives you the haste buff for like 10 seconds, you'll like spam, spells that have long cast times or something like that, or use like a big burst window. And then when it switches to crit, then you like focus on the high critical spells, that deal big damage, like Pyroblast or something like that. So I think if you have windows of like buffs, that's a little more interesting than cycling through like every attack. I think every attack is weird, but either way, I think both those could change up the way that you play your class. There also could be some other way that they implement it that I haven't thought about that could change that as well. Then we're going to go ahead and look at General Draven for the Venthyr, the cool gargoyle guy. Just kind of take a look at, overall what the theme is that they have going on. So for him, you become more built for war. You become more resilient, increasing your stamina by 10% and your size by 15%. Oh, I want to see some giant gnomes. Just some big bulky gnomes. Also, I feel really bad for any Tauren that picks this up and is trying to ride through a doorway. Like, it's already hard enough. Enduring Gloom, Door of Shadows, grants you a shield that absorbs physical damage based on your maximum health. Okay, so finally, that boring ability is looking a little more interesting because now you step through the shadows and you gain a shield that lasts 8 seconds. That's cool. Move as one. When a nearby ally gains temporary increased movement speed, you also gain the benefit up to 30%. Oh. Huh. So if they do Ghost Wolf, I'm assuming that's a permanent while you're Ghost Wolfed. While you're in Ghost Wolf form buff, so maybe you wouldn't get that one. But if, for example, a priest casts their power word shield on themselves and they have the movement and speed increase talent or whatever attached to that, then you would also get to move faster as well. That's neat. Tactical expertise. While deployed, the first 2 attacks against Draven are prevented each combat. Okay. Yeah, I think you can, it looks like you can drag these guys around as like your companion, and I think that's what that means. While deployed on a challenging mission, is it a mission table? I don't know what's going on here. While deployed on a challenging mission, Draven's damage is increased by 20%. That sounds like the mission table. No, I forgot about the mission table. I thought it was gone. Why, Blizzard? Please. Either make it super interesting or get rid of it. All right, and then weirdly enough, this one doesn't have a final culminating ability. You have to pick one at the end. So you either get Crash the Ramparts, your damaging attacks and spells have a chance to call a Stoneborn ally to crash down onto your target, dealing a buttload of physical damage to all nearby enemies. Sweet. And Endless Watch. Your helpful spells have a high chance to apply Endless Watch, increasing avoidance by 100 for 20 seconds. When an ally falls below 50% health, Endless Watch is consumed to heal them for 2,000. Okay. Well, I have to say, after taking a look at the Soulbind talent trees that we have so far, I think that these are actually really nice. They aren't drastically changing the gameplay of the classes in terms of like mixing in new abilities to your spells or in general changing the way you're using your spells. There's a couple that have the potential to do that, but what I am liking so far is I see a lot of cool, interesting utility modifications that are available. So for me, if this would have been something like, hey, increase strength by 5, hey, increase your haste by 1%, blah, 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 like all those kind of like stat increase effects in a talent tree, I would have really been disappointed by the Soulbind calculator. Or not the calculator, the Soulbind system. They could have done some crazier stuff, but I get what they're kind of going for here. You have the Covenant signature ability and class ability as kind of the big gameplay changing potentials. Whereas the Soulbind is something they want you to be able to change up fairly frequently if you need to. So I think they did a good job here, because when I was looking through the Night Fae, for example, each one of these has things that I like and I don't like. And depending on the situation, and what I'm doing, I think I would actively change from one talent tree to another. Like, I really like this Wild Hunt's charge, changing that soul shape into a charge for a class that doesn't have that, have access to something like a charge or a movement skill ability. This sounds actually really cool, but maybe I'm on a class like Warrior where I already have this stuff and I'm not interested in the rest of this tree. Maybe I would want to go change it up to something like this, run a bunch of dungeons with Swift Patrol or Care Package or something like that. Like, I think these are interesting and you're supposed to be able to change between them fairly easily. And I do think, I do like this system. I would have to say that I like this one. And this is coming from someone who, like, I didn't like the Essence system for, Battle for Azeroth. I didn't really like the whatever the name of the system was in Legion, the little talent tree in Argus on the ship. I was not crazy about that one. So I've seen these mini talent trees sort of things before, and other little kind of micro systems that they put in. And I haven't been a fan of them in the past. I think these look fun. These look interesting just on their own. Like, I still don't know what gets plugged into these conduit slots and how that's going to affect any of this stuff. That's another layer that we haven't even looked at yet. And for the most part, it seems like these are the same. At least on the Soulbind calculator with what we know so far. Like, if you look at it, every utility slot increases your movement speed by 6%. Every damage slot, or whatever it's called, power slot, increases your damage and healing by 4%. And then every defensive slot reduces your damage taken by 3%. So these are fine. I think depending on what gets plugged into them, this could... either maybe this is where the boring sort of stat increases come in, like you just plug in, something to the utility slot and it gives you stamina or whatever. And I think even if these kind of fall flat, these are still interesting enough. One of the things that I really like about these that I didn't like for Battle for Azeroth has the talent system for like the mission table, is that these, for the most part, are not tied to a specific type of content or a specific system, right? Some of them are tied to a particular ability, the Covenant ability, but if you're getting these, you're in the Covenant, you have the ability. So, this one reduces the cooldown on Soul Shape. Well, you can't get this without being in the Night Fae Covenant and having the Soul Shape ability, so it's still relevant. But you have stuff like, let's see here. After 5 seconds standing still, you take 10% less physical damage until you move. That's in Legacy content. Maybe, I don't know if all these apply, like outside of Shadowlands. I don't know if that's confirmed, but this works in dungeons, this works in raids, it works in PvP, it works in the open world, it works in Torghast Tower, like this kind of stuff. It's just generic. So whatever type of content you want to do, it's relevant. It's not like, hey, this talent tree is hyper focused on this one type of content and giving you benefits that only apply to this one type of content. So this is another reason that I actually do like the Soulbind system. It's broader. It encompasses more things that you can do. And I like that quite a bit. So that is going to do it for this stream. We have talked about all kinds of stuff. Big emphasis on Torghast and the Soulbind system. I did want to get into these a little bit. We'll come back around to the Soulbind system once we have the other once we have the Bastion Soulbinds and the rest of the Venthyr ones. We'll take a look at those. Hopefully we'll find out what to do with these utility conduits and be able to take a look at that as well. As we go forward, I'm going to continue to try to check in like once a week-ish and just give some updates on news and additional thoughts on classes and other stuff that's going on with the alpha. Like I said, I want to keep an eye on it. Right now, it's a mixed bag. There's stuff that I like. Torghast, I like the Soulbinds. I think a lot of the class Covenant abilities actually look pretty interesting. The Covenant signature abilities themselves look pretty good as well. Some things I'm kind of like lukewarm on are the general baseline class changes for a lot of the classes don't seem that interesting. The kind of lose-lose situation of, you know, having to pick a Covenant for the ability versus picking the Covenant because you think it's cool and matches your character. And, you know, some of the stuff for World of Warcraft, it looks like it's going to be the exact same that it has been, you know, questing, dungeons, all that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily a bad thing as long as the classes play well. I would just like to see more out of the baseline class changes, but there's plenty of time for that. Like I said, I don't have access to the alpha yet. If I do get access to it, I will make some content on it. I'll play some stuff, actually get to play some classes, show them off, and let you know what I think of them in action. The likelihood of me getting into alpha is probably low. I may get into the beta. Even then, it might be towards the end. I don't know. I don't have the kind of account that Blizzard wants to just give that access to, so we'll have to see. And just to recap on a question from earlier, in terms of any sort of World of Warcraft content, if I make anything going forward between now and Shadowlands, it's going to be these videos where I check in and stay up to date on what's going on in Shadowlands, or it'll be more evergreen style content, something like an add-on guide that is going to carry through into Shadowlands. I don't think it's really worth the time investment to make additional class guides and things when classes are drastically changing for the upcoming expansion. And then in terms of other World of Warcraft content, BFA has zero appeal for me. So there's nothing there that I'm wanting to make content for. So hopefully you enjoyed the stream. Tune in next time. We'll talk about some more Shadowlands, and I will have some other videos coming up in the future, not related to World of Warcraft. Some stuff for Legends of Runeterra, which is coming out next week. I've got some indie games on the back burner that I've been working on some first impression videos and Let's Plays and stuff for. So we'll see what happens. Everybody stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning into the stream. If you're watching it later on, don't forget to give it a like if you enjoyed it. And thanks for putting up with the kind of technical issues at the beginning there. Like I said, stay safe. Hope you're having fun in whatever it is that you're doing. As always, I'll see you on the next video.